Our wireless news. We're here today with Infinetics Research and Openwave Mobility. Today's topic is driving new revenues with policy management and subscriber engagement. Our guests today include Giere Levine, who's directing analyst with Infinetics. We have two speakers from Openwave Mobility. The first one will be Michael Rodgers, and the second will be John Giere, who's CEO and president of Openwave Mobility. At this time, we're going to start a quick poll just to get a sense for the audience and interest levels of the audience. So your first poll should be on the screen.
This meeting is now over. Thank you for calling.
Thank you for your votes. We'll keep it open for another 10 to 15 seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share the results. Okay, at this time I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter, and we'll come back and talk about some of these polling results at the Q&A. So at this time I'd like to introduce Giere Levine, who's directing analyst, service enablement, and subscriber intelligence for Infinetics. Giere, thanks for joining us today.
Great, thanks so much, Jeff. Thanks to everyone who's joining us, and we appreciate your participation. So I think this first slide here really sums up the primary challenge to mobile operators in 2002. It's really this point right here, the fact that mobile data usage has exploded, really driven in large part by smartphone adoption. We've seen year-over-year double-digit growth in smartphones. And as consumers get their hands on these increasingly sophisticated devices, that's really driving their consumption of mobile data. The problem that we're seeing, though, is the fact that spending on mobile data just hasn't risen enough yet to compensate for the decline in voice revenue in many regions. And then at the same time, what we're seeing is that with that increased consumption comes new usage behavior. Consumers are relying more on their mobile services than they may have in the past, and they want those services to be ubiquitous and to be always available to them. And at the same time, on a more macro level, we're seeing some economic and geopolitical trends that are having also an impact on telecom and on mobile revenue. We're seeing ongoing high jobless rates in Europe as the region's debt crisis worsens, and that's led to a decline in global service revenue, particularly as the market there reaches saturation, with well over 100% mobile penetration in some markets. We've also seen political unrest in many countries within, for example, the Middle East and Asia, affecting telecom service revenue. These situations have contributed to some ongoing decline in ARPU and in subscriber losses in many regions, particularly given that while data ARPU are on the rise in most regions, as I noted earlier, they're simply not rising fast enough to counter the decline of voice revenue. I'm sorry, I think we're having a problem with my slides. Is there a way to get them on the screen? Okay. Well, maybe I could just sort of continue, and we can catch up with the slides as this gets resolved. It's kind of the problem with technology. It doesn't always work quite right. So I guess moving on, the problem with network investment.
Sure. Can you hear me okay? This is Jeff.
I can hear you. I'm not getting any option to share my slides. Nothing is being pushed out to me.
Well, let's do this. I'm going to share the results of the poll real quick, and then John, if you could perhaps take over for her slide presentation, or just reshare the presentation with her, that'd be great. So the poll we had a few minutes ago: what is your primary strategy to inform subscribers currently of new offers on overage charges? We had some mention SMS, while the majority of folks said all of the above. We did have 42% say none of the above. So as we get into Q&A, I look forward to talking about some of the other options that people are using to inform subscribers of new offers. Okay, John, can we share the slide with share now? Share.
I think she's dialing back in.
Okay. Attendees, bear with us for just 1 minute where our speaker lost her connection.
Hello?
Hello, Cher. It's nice to have you back.
Okay, there we go. Okay, apologies for that. Like I said, technology doesn't always exactly work as planned, so let's kind of pick up where we left off. So, as I noted, we're seeing ongoing decline in ARPU and subscriber losses in many regions, and that's really given that, while, as I noted earlier, data ARPU is on the rise in most regions, it's simply not rising fast enough to counter the decline of voice revenue. Having said that, though, we are seeing an increase in CapEx spending as we enter this new investment cycle, and that's really being driven by a few major initiatives. For one thing, wireline broadband initiatives in certain markets. Another is, of course, 3G rollouts in emerging markets such as Africa and CALA, as well as a ramp-up in LTE deployments in many of the more developed markets in North America, Europe, and in Latin America. The problem with those network investments, though, is that operators just can't build their way out of this congestion issue. And video provides an excellent case in point. It's clear that consumers love their video, not just consuming video for personal entertainment, things like Netflix, which accounts for over 20% of Internet backbone traffic in the United States. But video has also become part of consumer social communication, so things like viewing the latest viral YouTube clip or sending photos and videos to friends and relatives. And devices such as smartphones and tablets have become video conferencing devices with the advent of applications like FaceTime and Skype. And that trend isn't going to slow down anytime soon, particularly as new technologies such as HD phones and 3D video come on the horizon. So the average monthly traffic in 2014, according to some of the latest projections, will be equivalent to 32 million people streaming in HD video and 3D continuously for the entire month. that's an enormous bandwidth requirement, and operators simply cannot build out their network infrastructure fast enough to support that, nor is it economically feasible for them to do so. And that's where policy management comes in. So given that operators can't build their way out of these congestion issues, policy offers a way to better manage the impact on the network by offering more control over how network and service resources are being used. So while the earlier implementations of policy were more of a brute force stick approach, in which policy systems were used to block or to throttle or otherwise shape network traffic, what we've seen over the last few years is an increased interest in a gentler approach. We'll call it the carrot approach, in which policy is being used to manage network and service resources by shaping and incenting subscriber behavior. And even more recently, we've seen interest in taking policy management a step further and enabling policy capabilities to actually increase revenue per user by supporting new services and new functionality. And as that occurs, the policy solutions on the market are evolving to meet these new models. So while originally policy management was local, it was router-based and largely limited to managing a single service on a single network, we've really seen it rapidly moving to be both dynamic. So for example, being able to support multiple factors such as time of day or application requirements, as well as convergent, able to support multiple services, multiple network types, etc. So then what comes next? Well, we believe it's this concept that we call contextual policy, and Openwave Mobility refers to as subscriber engagement, in which policy management is tightly integrated with subscriber information in order to make policy decisions that are optimized for this specific subscriber. And by subscriber information, I mean everything from preferences or entitlements to the relative value of the customer, or perhaps the customer's likelihood to churn. And that could all impact what services and offers you want to make to the customer. It could include the subscriber's physical location. So say, for example, you wanted to deliver a real-time offer that's specific to where the customer is at that moment in time. Another parameter could be network conditions. So for example, if you know how the network is performing and you know what services the subscriber is accessing and his relative value to you, you could then make decisions on, for example, whether to offload that customer to ensure a certain quality of service onto a related Wi-Fi network. And as that occurs, the value of what you're feeding the policy engine becomes more and more important. Operators have a wealth of subscriber information at their fingertips, whether you're talking about IT data or billing data or network data. And once that data is consolidated in some way and then normalized, you can then derive some real value from that information via analytics and turn it into information that can then be used to make policy decisions to support things like value-added services, capabilities, more targeted services, and a more consistent customer experience, which of course becomes a valuable tool in reducing churn and increasing revenue per user. So with that, I thought it'd be useful to provide a few examples of what I mean in terms of use cases. One is leveraging these capabilities to address network congestion. So while more traditional static policy control solutions might have enabled an operator to deal with network congestion by throttling back users or possibly throttling high bandwidth applications like peer-to-peer traffic, an alternative is a more subscriber-focused contextual approach to traffic management. So for example, an operator could use subscriber-aware policy control to prioritize high-value customers during peak hours. And then by bringing real-time charging into the mix, you could take that one step further and charge those subscribers who are not prioritized a premium for a temporary bandwidth boost during peak hours. So for example, if they're watching a video and they want a guaranteed QoS for a specific period of time. Or another example could be charging different rates based on factors such as time of day or where the subscriber is located. And that could encourage the customer to use maybe a specific underutilized cell site by charging a lower rate. And that really enables active real-time network optimization. So, for example, Zong is a Pakistani operator that does location-based charging, in which the cost of a voice or data session varies by where the subscriber is physically located. A second use case is this whole area of customer experience management, which of course is generating so much buzz these days. In many of the emerging markets, we're seeing a very high number of prepaid customers who really think nothing of swapping out SIM cards to get the best possible deal, which of course means high churn, low loyalty, as well as low revenue per user. Contextual policy can help mitigate that as well as increase revenue by things like identifying those customers with a high propensity to churn and then offering targeted offers or promotions to those subscribers. So, for example, DST Brunei is using subscriber data to support automated real-time campaign management and delivering contextual campaigns and rewards. You could also do things like leverage customer data to as well as things like location or demographics to identify cross-sell and upsell opportunities, which allow for more targeted marketing. And then having that kind of customer information as the basis for these policy decisions enables the operator to be more consistent in how it treats the customer regardless of service or of device or of access network, which of course is an important part of an overall customer experience management strategy. And then finally, there's the topic of shared data plans, which has become a hot topic in several markets, particularly in the more developed markets such as North America and Western Europe. So with these new pricing models, a volume of data is shared among family members or employees or other groups, or possibly a single customer has a bucket of data for multiple devices like smartphones or tablets. And this new model has generated a lot of interest among operators looking to move away from traditional all-you-can-eat data plans. However, once there's no longer a one-to-one relationship between the subscription and the user and/or the user and the device, that really creates the need to be able to identify the individual user or the device within that shared data plan. And then once that occurs, there's the opportunity to target specific members. So, for example, you could send an offer directly to a teenager's smartphone, or to enable parents to set up specific usage controls within that shared bucket of data. It's something as simple as data caps or as sophisticated as very granular parental control over what kids are allowed to do and when. And while I think all operators offering shared data plans need to be able to offer that degree of control over individual devices or users, they also have the opportunity to monetize that control, such as we've seen Verizon Wireless do by offering usage controls at a premium to its shared data customers. So what does this mean for the market? Well, for one thing, over the past 12 to 18 months, we've really seen the role of policy management expanding within operators, moving beyond its traditional position in the network realm and its traditional function of bandwidth management to encompass a new range of operator requirements. And then as that's occurred, we've seen policy investments no longer being made solely based on the technology. So increasingly, RFPs and RFIs are requiring not just specific technical features, things like standards compliance and scalability requirements, but also a range of use cases that the operator can implement with a minimum of customization. And we think we're going to see more and more of a focus on analytics solutions being deployed hand in hand with policy, given that the power of a policy management system really lies in the information that's being supplied to it. So as operators shift their focus from network policy to service and subscriber policy, they're increasingly recognizing that they need to be able to gather and analyze data about services and customers and then make policy decisions based on that information. And then finally, as these shifts occur, we're expecting to see the vendor landscape changing as well to meet these new challenges. So while network equipment suppliers were the earliest vendors for policy management solutions, we're seeing operators increasingly investing in options from independent software providers to meet their requirements, and we do expect that to continue, particularly as those vendors expand and evolve their solutions to encompass capabilities such as subscriber management and real-time convergent charging. So the point I'd like to close out with and have you take away with you is that this concept of conceptual policy is really fitting into a number of larger initiatives within the operator. It's allowing operators to take a different approach to how they manage bandwidth by encouraging more efficient bandwidth utilization and better tying bandwidth consumed to the price being charged rather than just limiting or blocking consumption. It's increasingly part of network upgrade projects, both 3G and LTE, in terms of helping operators better monetize these investments. And then finally, it's supporting larger customer experience management initiatives by providing a way for operators to offer their subscribers and their prospects more creative and targeted services that are consistent across multiple delivery mechanisms and multiple end-user devices. So with that, I'm going to hand this back over to Jeff and over to the Openwave folks.
Thank you, Giere. I really appreciate that presentation. And for those who may have joined this presentation late, our focus is on new revenues for mobile operators using policy management subscriber engagement. Our next speaker will be John Giere, who is CEO and President of Openwave Mobility. John, I'll leave it to you. Thank you for joining us.
Jeff, thank you. Giere, thank you. Really appreciate the setup here. So I think I'm going to start with a key image I want us all to think about, and it's around the scissors problem. Giere did a beautiful job of laying out the macro level movement around joblessness and concerns in Europe, the double-digit growth of smartphones. Rather than go into that in more detail, I just leave us with two thoughts. There was a recent McKinsey report which traced back to mid-2000s, pre-smartphone, where they outlined a 10-fold decrease in average revenue per gigabyte. And I think what the problem that demonstrates is when you have a market with the demand, as Giere outlined well, and against a cost structure that needs to support that demand, and that kind of decrease in constant real dollars, you have a real dilemma. And the only thing a scissors is good for initially is cutting things. But even if you look at the recent marketplace and some of the reports, the quarterly reports by many of the large vendors or large operators, you can see inside all of that a clear need to do something different. Cutting costs is only going to bring us to a certain point in time. We need to go and turn around and reverse and create a new average service profitability per user. And that's going to take a dramatic change in how we think of our users. To be profitable, we must create a positive customer engagement experience, as Giere ended her presentation with. This is the kind of experience that our customers are getting from the various competitors, be they device and platform, be they over-the-top applications. We must create our own space, our own opportunity, and drive a delightful and profitable customer experience. So let's take a look at what that's going to involve. There are a variety of pricing plans, but fundamentally there's pretty much three customer levers around the world that we're pushing these days. One is around devices. Frankly, not much in our control. It's around the iOS, the Android, the Microsoft platforms, and the devices that display those and make those usable. That's a third-party driver. We can do different packaging, we can do different things, but there's not much to influence it. A lot's been made of speed. There's constant 2G, 3G, 4G, the speed, the latency, and certainly the quality of experience, as we know in our software, is absolutely vital. but it's pretty difficult to create a pricing plan that somebody's going to find a unique and delightful customer experience. And finally, we're primarily charging people on a metric, megabytes, gigabytes, which is quite frankly, outside of a sophisticated audience like the folks on this call, extremely difficult for people to understand, plan, and enjoy and delight in accessing services when they're charged on a metric that quite frankly they don't even fully understand and couldn't explain to one another if asked. And like so many great moments in history, there is another revolution, another French Revolution, which quite frankly was the dawn of the American democracy. And this revolution is about the marketplace where one of the carriers, Free Mobile, has brought its broadband offering, its low cost, very thrifty, very capable broadband offering into the mobile side and created a significant market inflection point. To the point where one of the primary carriers, for example Orange, in Les Tribunes, it's noted, is delivering 3 times the data for 1/3 the cost in just the last 12 months. All of the respective competitors in that marketplace have taken significant cost against their bottom line, including having to reduce personnel and cost structures in accordance with this. But as I said back in the scissors, that's a very limited, unexciting, and frankly unstimulating response in the end of the day. So we need to pull new business levers. It's absolutely imperative that we redefine the relationship with the customer. We expand their personal choices as they're accustomed to in this new economy. And we work hard to increase the perceived value of the services we deliver. But it's not just enough to go repackage our present plans, create new giveaways or new incentives, because a lot has changed over the last couple of years in a parallel manner to the advent of the smartphone. And primarily it's around the economy, the new economy of micropayments. Purchase what you need when you need it. You know, as far back as 8 or 9 years ago when Steve Jobs first introduced iTunes, we went from a CD packaging to a digital single. And I was recently reading his biography. That was a dramatic change in the music industry, and one in which was very difficult for many of the main competitors and artists to adjust to. You come a little closer, nearer now, you look at assets, all the way from a bike, which could be thousands of dollars, to a car, which would be hundreds, potentially hundreds of thousands of euros. No longer is that asset seen as a purchase asset, but more and more frequently, particularly in urban centers, you've seen the proliferation of the bike stands, where you rent by the hour, rent by the day. You purchase what you need when you need it. Zipcar, one of the fastest growing companies here in the Bay Area where I live, is all about being able to rent a car literally by the half hour, and literally you can rent the insurance and all the other requirements around driving a car for that period in time, only what you need when you need it. I'll digress slightly. There's a fascinating example now in the Bay Area here in San Francisco. Many of you might relate to this. As you travel around the world, much like myself, there's now a service that will rent out your house while you're traveling by the night. These kind of innovative new models absolutely are aimed at the type of subscribers that we're going to need to appeal to. And thus we're going to need to give them very personal choices in the manner they can consume that they're comfortable consuming with. So what does this mean for our industry? What does this mean for the way in which we service our customers? What it means is we're going to have to look at all the evolving data pricing levers. Today our software supports all of these in this time frame, and there's more that we're bringing on by the day. It's time. So why are we charging people in gigabits? As Michael Rodgers, our head of products management here in Price Plan Innovation, will show us, there's a great unleashed power to be able to charge people video in and around the time consumption versus the gigabyte consumption. We can certainly cater to their device needs uniquely. We can certainly continue to cater to speed. We can cater to their individual user preferences, as Giere noted, around analytics, where we look at a lot of the URL traffic and try to prompt people for discounted services to news sites, etc. Certainly around apps. A group plan we've recently introduced is all about bringing the group plan and being able to share data. Content, there's high-def content coming every day. Sponsorship, time of day access. The fundamental point is we can create multiple associations unique to individual users and therefore be able to establish a new personalized value that's in line with the new economy of micropayments and microconsumption. The way we look at that and the way we do that is by embracing the power of the PCC ecosystem. It's out there, as Giere noted, it's become much more sophisticated. It's evolving from its basic, I'll think of it as voiceover, LTE voice. It's now evolving into data. It's evolving from the sledgehammer approach that was at one point primarily orientated around sending policies to block to now much more intelligent policy management. And to that end, we've had numerous conferences, webinars, all kinds of discussion around policy control. I think we all know that area pretty darn well. We've had an equal amount around policy enforcement at the platform level, like you do with our Integra platform. What I'm advocating today, where we haven't had enough discussion, is around the policy engagement, which is specific to the customer experience. And they get that experience via a variety of ways. A toolbar, real-time inline notification, redirects to web portals, push notification, SMS, but all of that summarizes up to the customer policy engagement or experience. And this is where we're going to make our money. This is where policy control and policy enforcement manifests itself for an end user. This is why they want our service. And this is where we delight them. And I'm going to have Michael show us a live demonstration of how that works. There are three core principles that you'll note in this demonstration. One, we've designed our software to fit the activity. You're on the move. It's no longer a web stationary-based experience. It's got to be easy to understand, simple to use, and fast. And it's got to engage the customer, excite the customer. Let's delight the customer. Do it in the way in which we see the device and the platform and the applications from over the top focus on. And that brings us into a brand, and I use that term as a former CMO of a number of major companies for a specific reason. It's a brand new services world. It's the way in which we want our customers to experience us and to delight in what we provide them. So as I said, we create services with new metrics. A time dimension might be one, an application, and a variety of other dimensions are possible. We introduce lower cost data plan options so that people can gradually become accustomed to data, the cost associated with data, and become enthusiastic users of our service. It allows us to upsell services as add-ons, engage them in line, engage them real time, engage them in a manner in which they can consume what they want when they want it. No surprises. We had a brief period there where we were providing a lot of PR to the people who are the skeptics of the communications business with the bill shock, the roaming, the other types of services that often catch people after the fact and create poor customer experiences and poor PR. And finally, and most important, we can empower these users through the self-care service that's available to them. Let them make the choices, let them decide what's best, and let them enjoy the experience they want to enjoy. And now, as I said, I'd like to turn this over to Michael Rodgers. Michael is our head of product management for the Price Plan Innovation software suite, which powers this solution. Michael?
Hey, thank you, John. So as John said, I just wanted to, I guess, illustrate what he's been talking about in terms of how to sell a service such as video in a seamless manner to users as a if you will, an add-on service in this micropayment economy. So what I'm going to show you here is really a typical user experience of what it might look like. So here we have, I'm just going to start playing. We have a user who is basically going to go to YouTube, In this particular case, the YouTube is restricted from them, video is restricted from their plan. So we're going to see some evidence here of user engagement, both inline in the video, as you can see, and through a push notification that's appearing on the screen, giving the user the ability to seamlessly go through to self-care and to purchase a plan inline. In this case, they're buying premium video, 1 hour access. And after that, they get redirected. The self-care shows that they've now got a video plan, and they can then continue to go back to YouTube and immediately restart the video, and the policy is updated in real time, and the user gains access to that video content. So it's as simple as that. It's the idea of engaging the user, as John has indicated, inline, and giving them options on how to proceed. So what I wanted to do now as well is look at a little bit under the bonnet in terms of how do you actually implement this type of solution, such as selling video on demand. If we look here, this is basically, I guess, a architecture sort of view of our solution in network. And there's a couple of things that I wanted to run through here in slide mode. So first of all, we have a user who is entering the system. We're sitting between the access network and the internet, making a video request. We're also receiving on the control pane their identity, which we can use to resolve into some policy details. In this particular example, in real time, we're pushing down to the enforcement layer that this user is restricted of accessing video. So when the video request is made, we need the enforcement layer essentially to monitor that traffic. And once they identify that the user is accessing video, then we have a traffic steering function happening. This then will basically invoke our user engagement module, if you will, which informs the user of why they're restricted through mechanisms such as inline video notification or push notification, as is depicted here. And then the user can do something about that. So how do we go about buying a plan? So in this particular example, we have the user purchasing a video pass. What is happening then is a number of back-end activities. One is that the user is billed for the service, so we have real-time interaction with a billing system, charging the user for the fee that was indicated. We have a provisioning activity where the plan is updated to their profile in real time. And we also have, more importantly, the real-time update of policy so that the restriction that previously applied is no longer there. This means that the user can then access the video immediately, and what we see then is the video played as the example showed, and they have access to self-care to monitor how much time they have remaining if they purchase, say, that video by the hour. So that's just an illustrative example of how you actually make something like that real, and that's how our solution would actually implement such a solution. I'm going to move forward now, and before we close, I'm going to talk a little bit about basically some examples in the industry that we've seen in rolling out service-oriented pricing models and the success that we've seen. There's been some key learnings, and I wanted to share some of them with you. So I guess what we are seeing is certainly for any of the operators that we have dealt with who have rolled out this type of service-oriented pricing, there has been a significant upside in terms of ARPU. And that has been mainly due to the fact that users are compelled to buy these add-on purchases, these micropayment purchases that John referred to. In terms of adoption, again, we're seeing a very significant uptake, 1 in 5, which is, if you look at and compare that to mobile advertising where the click-through rate is much, much, much smaller. And what we feel is the main reason behind this is the fact that the actual engagement is happening in real time. The engagement is contextual, it's meaningful, and it's valuable to the end user, so they are much more likely to uptake that offer. What is also important is that when you're rolling out these form of service-based pricing, it's important that you provide the user with choice to maximize, from an operator perspective, your margins. So what I mean by that is that you have some low-cost options where a user could buy video by the hour, or they may also have a higher cost option where they would buy it for, say, a week or 30 days at a higher fee. Having a mix of those two options means you're going to maximize your uptake and maximize your revenue. And finally, as is illustrated in the solutions we've just been showing, there's a great deal of self-care, so the user is more empowered to take control over the service. And this has clearly a positive impact from an end user perspective, but also from a customer care perspective. it reduces the amount of customer care calls that we typically see going into the operator rolling out these type of services, which saves them money in the long term. So there are some basically insights into the evidence we've seen in the market today of this type of pricing working very effectively, mainly due to the fact that we are embracing this policy engagement element in our solution, something that we feel is missing to a great part to date in the market. And with that, I'm going to just close. Basically, I would encourage you to come and visit our site. It's openwavemobility.com. And also for all of you that have registered for this webinar, there is a related white paper that will be made available to you on tiered pricing evolution and on service-based pricing.
I want to close.
Okay, I'm just going to hand you back to John now for a second.
I'm sorry, Michael. I just wanted to say in one last closing remark around this is, hopefully in this particular sequence of slides, we've rapidly and quickly taken you through the challenges as well as the opportunities. And we've shown you how to take the scissors and not use it for cutting costs, but rather for cutting the cord to our past price plan offerings and developing new and innovative offerings. As Michael notes, we have the URL here where you can go and look at the presentation after we've completed it, as well as a new white paper we have specifically addressing this area. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Jeff now.
Great. John, Michael, Giere, thank you so much for the presentation. What I'd like to do at this point is launch the a second poll just quickly before we get into the Q&A. And the second question you can see on your screen now. And again, if folks could just take a minute and respond, we'll leave this open for a few seconds, about 30 seconds before we move into the Q&A. And just a couple housekeeping items. Audience can please submit the questions you may have as we get ready for Q&A. A link to this broadcast will be made available, and we'll be sending that to all the folks who registered for the webinar as well as who actually attended the webinar. So the question on the table today is, mobile data consumption continues to grow. What pricing models do you feel will be most effective going forward? We're going to leave it up for just a few more seconds as the votes continue to come in. Okay, I'll leave it open for 5 seconds more. If you haven't voted, please add your vote. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and share the results. And John, before we dive into some of the questions we've got, or Michael, I'd love your comments or feedback on this, on the responses you see to this poll. Is this consistent with what you've been seeing in the market?
I would say yes. It's interesting because the poll's kind of inverse of how people are implementing in the market, and since the question wasn't that, of course, but if you look at it, the variety of plans are there, but the 80-20 rule applies. It's primarily based around volume, megabytes and gigabytes. I do think there's a great interest. We're having a number of customers, as you know, we noted, are starting to introduce this software. I think the activity next year will be extremely high because I think, as reflected here, the value-based pricing is really important. I'm certainly sympathetic to the content provider contributing. That has proven to be an elusive goal, and I can tell you, living here in Silicon Valley and talking with these folks on a regular basis, they don't see that as their obligation. More education, more opportunity, more creating value for them will help, but at the present time, it is challenging to have that on an industry-wide level. There may be individual operators who can, but it's nonetheless challenging on an industry-wide level.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's move into the Q&A. And Giere, this first question is for you. What do you see as the key factors in providing effective user engagement solutions?
There's a couple of components that I think you really need to keep in mind. One is sort of the power of the policy engine. I think it's incredibly important that it be flexible, that it be powerful enough to support the transaction volume that some of these new approaches are going to generate. The other important factor is how you're treating your subscriber data. I think typically within most operators, at least most of the, particularly the tier ones, you have multiple silos of subscriber information located in any number of places with very little ability to do any kind of a consolidation or centralization of subscriber data. So I think the first step is really to take a hard look at how you're treating your subscriber data and figure out some sort of a strategy, whether you're talking about an actual federation or more of a virtualized approach. And that's kind of the basis for the sort of analysis that I spoke about.
Okay. Openwave folks, any comments there or any additional thoughts?
I think Giere has given a pretty good overview. I mean, we have an analytics engine that operates within our platform domain on layer 7 and provides a lot of insight, particularly to usage and to marketing folks, excuse me. But it is a relatively fragmented area. There's a lot of good analytics you can get at layer 2, layer 3. I think over the next 12 months or so, there's more and more work going in. We're certainly doing it to integrate those into a common database that can be accessible and easy to use to make responsive marketing decisions and responsive traffic management decisions as the situations evolve. And they evolve very quickly. I mean, video growth is growing exponentially faster than we projected even a year ago or 2 years ago. The particular types of behavior on smartphones are quite unique, as we've seen iPhone being very different from an Android experience in consumption and overall. So this analytics is vital to making sure that the customer experience is both delightful and profitable.
Okay. And Michael, I'll direct this one to you. How do you ensure a balanced approach to user engagement where you avoid the negative perception of either spam or Big Brother?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Basically, I think, and I hope it was relayed in the earlier part of the webinar. User engagement, clearly has to be, has to use the right medium. I think it needs to be aware of the device and its capabilities. But a very important aspect is that it needs to be contextually aware, so relevant to the activity that the user is doing at that time, because otherwise it can be perceived as being a nuisance, and basically it will be perceived as spam. So I think what the key points are is that it has to be real-time, it has to be contextually aware, and it has to suit the activity and suit the medium or the capability of the device. So, for example, we have seen quite a bit of negative press around things like push notification being overused by applications to a degree that users really kind of ignore a lot of those messages today in apps. So that's an example, I guess, of a misuse of a technology. So it's really important that that the owners of the application, in this case, also the operator, that they use it in a way that's meaningful to the user, and that the user can actually also, that it's two-way, that it's not just a one-way, that the user can easily interact with that notification, follow through to a promotion or a purchase or whatever it might be, and that way then I think you will get a positive user experience rather than a negative.
Okay. I've got an audience question here, which I think I hear quite often, and the question is, there's so many PCRF vendors these days. What are the key parameters which folks should use to be evaluating these PCRF vendors?
I'll start with a couple of comments from me. I think what I think is really important is that that policy, as we see, policy has evolved quite a bit in the last number of years, and it needs to evolve further. So one clear aspect I would see is that there needs to be, I guess, longevity in the solution, that it's capable of implementing new use cases as seamlessly and as effectively as possible, and that does not require redesign or re-architecture. So it needs to be a design, flexible design, so that users or operators can actually evolve as we move to more advanced policy models, some of which we've talked about or alluded to in this webinar. I think that's a key aspect. I think another aspect clearly is scalability. It has to scale in line with the actual volume of traffic that we're seeing in mobile. And clearly the amount of signaling traffic is going to grow as well. So there has been some concerns in the market about that of recent times. PCRFs need to be able to cope with that traffic. They also need to be able to, I think, delegate responsibility to some of the more advanced enforcement points in the network, so that they're not the required for every policy decision. I think that's really, from a practical perspective, that needs to happen. So there would be some points that I would put in place if you are evaluating a PCRF vendor.
I think it's important to note that in our deployments, we interoperate with a variety of PCRF vendors. And as Michael said, there are a number of ways we evaluate our partnerships with them to find the best ones, and that segment continues to evolve in terms of requirements and their ability to meet them.
Okay, good. And I have another question from the audience, and I'll just read it to you. Do you see this as a hosted solution that smaller regional carriers could share? And the question specifically asks about, is the cost for the technology geared for carriers with maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of customers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've built it very modular and scalable. In fact, if you go to our website, the way we package is, it's a single platform, but with modules around different types of services, be they data plans, be they video tethering, etc. So we've built this in mind to be very elastic and very capable of servicing small regional carriers to large global carriers. Obviously, size and scale is a lot dictates some of the cost structure here. We've also built it as an evolution into a software-defined network, into a hosted or cloud-based. At the present time, we don't see the present demand driving that. Most folks, particularly marketing departments, like to have control over their individual plans and be able to access those and change those and evolve those accordingly. But certainly over time, I could and would be open to discuss with anyone how this could be a multi-tenant solution.
Okay, and Giere, I noticed, did you have any comment, going back to the challenges or the criteria carriers should use in evaluating PCRF opportunities? Do you have any other comments there or thoughts?
Yeah, actually, we just conducted a survey of operators on sort of their policy management priorities and strategies. And, first of all, to agree completely with Michael, scalability is incredibly important. As he pointed out, I think there have been some concerns as transaction volumes and signaling traffic ramps up, having a solution that can support that. The other thing that really came across is the importance of flexibility, particularly as you start talking about this next generation of policy as being more than just simple bandwidth management. If you're talking about having it be an enabler for some advanced use cases, that ability to customize, to really not have to go back to your vendor for every single customization becomes more and more important. And interestingly, we've seen things like price become less and less important, and I really think that's because we're seeing operators view this as such a strategic capability going forward that they're really looking for that high quality, very scalable, very robust solution.
Thank you. John, you and I bump into each other at various shows all around the world, and I guess I want to kind of get under the hood for a minute on a question, and that is, in your mind's eye, what are some of the specific challenges that folks are having deploying these solutions? I mean, they seem very natural as a way to upsell and really provide a better experience and a better service. But as you look across the board, what are some of the challenges carriers are having deploying these type solutions?
So I would put them into two categories. One is being able to define that customer experience and know how you're going to execute on it. So going back as far as a year ago when I used to start these conversations with various operators that have now matured into real opportunities in business, I myself started probably on the wrong end of the stick, as did we often in our conversations, because most of the conversations were about all the infinite possibilities one could do. And certainly, you know, with technology and the platforms such as ourselves, I can present an infinite number of use cases that could drive potential revenue. What that leads is to an inability to make a decision sometimes. And so one of the key learnings we adopted was you've got to focus. You've got to start somewhere. I encourage anyone to not get caught up in overthinking of it. There is a Valley saying that, you know, failure to act is certain death. And I think that's really what defines this is, and that's why we put these packages together as we've presented them, because as Giere said, you've got to be flexible, you've got to be quick, you've got to try. Some things will work very well, some things will work medium well, and some things may not work well at all. But as long as you can contain the exposure in all of those so that clearly the successes outweigh the failures, that's the critical piece of this. And that's the piece we're focused on. Make these packages, wrap them up, clearly define them, clearly define the value proposition for both the operator and the end user, and then put a marketing plan around those that accentuates the value of those offerings. Drive them, try them, iterate them, and succeed with them. So that's number one. It's about the fear of failure. Number two, and I think Giere indicated, there are still remaining a lot of challenges, and they're not technical. In most of these cases, I could quickly come in and show you how in a 90-day period I'd have your service up and running, and you'd start introducing it to customers. But that does involve, it's not simplistic to involve the cross-collaboration essential to making this successful. Because it's not singularly a technical decision. It's not singularly a market decision. It's a company decision. And the companies that can focus on the end user quickly and bring the various parties to the table can rapidly focus on introducing the right type of solution. Because the solution is going to provide a customer experience critical to marketing. It does sit in the network today, so it's got to make sure that it operates and interoperates, as we accentuate, with all the various pieces of a network, be they DPI, be they PCRFs. And then finally, the analytics has to be gathered and created so that it's useful. And therefore, some thought has to go into what are we looking for. Again, another complexity there is you can produce reports ad infinitum. The value of the reports are only what gets done with them.
Got it. Okay, we got time for a couple other questions. Giere, I want to come back. Were you finished, John? I'm sorry.
Yep, I'm perfectly fine. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Giere, what trends are you seeing in emerging markets with respect to policy control and charging? Are they the same in markets with higher smartphone penetration?
Interesting question. Not so much. What we're really seeing in the more developed markets is much of the driver is behind LTE networks. So their operators are making this type of investment in the network infrastructure. They want to make sure that they can, I mean, I think the word monetize is kind of overused, but I think here it's probably appropriate. They want to make sure they're getting their investment back. The developing markets are interesting. It tends to be more around subscriber churn, around campaign management. You know, as I noted in my presentation, we have very high churn rates in those markets, very low ARPU, and you know, subscribers who really think nothing of kind of swapping out SIM cards to get the best possible deal. So the idea is to really create a more sticky customer, raise revenue per user, and sort of address the really high volume of customers that are coming online on a monthly basis.
Okay, we've got time for one final question here, and John or Michael, I'll leave it up to you. We had a question about the 1-800 data services, sounding like a great idea, but maybe difficult to implement. Or the other question that's kind of pending here is, with LT adding capacity, why should operators diversify in their data pricing models beyond simple usage and bandwidth tiered pricing? I'll quickly answer the second one with one line, and then I'm going to ask Michael to take the.
So you're adding capacity. What if it's unprofitable capacity? Michael, you go ahead and take the first question.
Sure. So yeah, the 1-800 data service, I mean, it's a great idea. I think, and we're certainly seeing a lot of talk about it in the U.S. market. So conceptually, you know, people get it. It's an easy concept, and voice, it's well understood and very successful. I think for it to work in data, I think a couple of things need to happen. Obviously, there needs to be, I think, a collaborative effort for sure. The OTT players need to see value in why they should pay, say, the operator for access to the service as opposed to charging the subscriber. So there needs to be a compelling argument made there. The other piece, I guess, which I think is more of a challenge to the operators, is that the actual in providing the service, it has to be you know, as well defined as it can be. And one of the problems, I guess, that you see with 800 is that, you know, what constitutes 800 data, what constitutes not. If I've got free Facebook, but I've got links from that page, are they free? If I go to YouTube from Facebook, is that free? So basically, the definition of the service needs to be clear, no ambiguity, so that the end user understands what they're getting for free, and the operators plus the provider of that service is not subject to leakage. I think, you know, there are challenges, but I think we are already seeing some evidence of you know, kind of similar type of services being offered. We're seeing relationships, say, with like in Spotify in Europe, working with a number of operators to provide, you know, their service as part of a data plan, so that basically you get essentially free access to Spotify as part of your plan. So that's a kind of a manifestation of it. And I think you'll have, you know, it'll be some time before it's ubiquitous. But I think we will see more and more collaboration between the operator and content providers, stroke OTT players, to provide these type of services, and I'm confident it will happen.
Great. Well, listen, I want to thank Giere. Thank you very much for joining us today. John and Michael, it's always a pleasure. All the audience, thank you for joining us. This presentation will be made available on demand. You'll receive a link in the next 24 hours with access to this presentation. The questions that were submitted will be given over to Openwave and Infinetics, and they'll be getting back to the folks who did ask questions. So at this time, we'll wrap up today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.